Okay, great. Thanks everyone for joining us. I know this is a Saturday and you got lots of things you could be doing, so thank you for sharing it with us. Marketing is kind of art and it's kind of science. One thing I can guarantee is that your board members are always going to tell you you're not doing it right. So what we're going to try to do in this next half hour is we have some experts in marketing in B2B and B2C and all kinds of different areas, and we're going to answer your questions. We've got a few questions of our own. If you have the TiEcon app, it's super easy to use. Just follow the 37-step process to register, get an email, validate, allow notifications, and you'll be ready. Or you can use the microphones in the room. So first of all, what I want to do is I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell the audience a little bit about their marketing background. So we'll start with you, Mickey.
Okay, hi, I'm Mickey. I run sales and marketing for a company called StyleSeat, which is a marketplace for consumers to find, book, and pay for beauty services. I am a die-hard consumer marketer, started in packaged goods and made the break to technology at eBay, and then followed that with Trulia. So I've done a number of consumer-driven marketplaces, and StyleSeat is the latest and greatest.
Excellent.
Edwin D'Souza. I do product marketing and product management for MySQL. So I'm very focused on how we make products and sell products to IT, to developers. In addition to MySQL, I've done development tools before. So if there are questions you have about anything to do with developers or IT, I probably can answer those.
Hi, I'm Ashu Garg. I'm a general partner at Foundation Capital, an early stage venture capital firm. I started my career in marketing at Unilever, so in CPG marketing, and since then I've been in and around marketing for a couple of decades, both B2C and B2B. At Foundation, I invest mostly in enterprise software, and within that, in particular, have built sort of a niche around marketing technology companies. So I've spent a lot of time with companies like TubeMogul, Aggregate Knowledge, Localytics, Adroll, and others. And more broadly, have also been sort of spearheading sort of our efforts in the marketing space. Recently wrote an ebook called The Decade of the CMO on sort of the evolution of marketing as well.
Well, why don't we actually start with that? Because from my perspective, marketing has undergone a lot of change in the last 10, 15 years. So Ashu, starting with you, what do you think have been the biggest shifts in marketing that you've seen in recent years?
I think it really boils down to three things. I think first and foremost, marketing is becoming a technical discipline. And while that change has been happening over the last 10 years, it's really built momentum in the last 24 to 36 months. And so today, every marketer needs to think of the left brain and the right brain in equal measure. I think the second fundamental shift that's happened in marketing is the shift from the black line or the bright line between performance marketing and brand marketing. I think today, all marketing has a performance component and a brand component. And so those lines are very gray, and it completely changes how you think about marketing. I think the third major shift has been really how significant digital has become really in the last 2 or 3 years. We've been seeing digital now for 15 years, obviously. But today, finally, digital marketing is, for a lot of companies, a larger component of their marketing than offline marketing or traditional TV. And that inflection point was, really came about in the last year or two.
So Mickey, what are you seeing in terms of that quantified marketing and demand gen versus traditional brand marketing?
So I agree and disagree with Ashu. I agree in the sense that brand has taken on a component of performance in it, and the way that we measure brand has evolved dramatically in the last 36 months. But I do also think that brand is still very undervalued within Silicon Valley, relatively speaking. I think it has evolved. When I first moved here, which is 10 years ago, and I had a brand marketing background, nobody wanted to hire me. Now it feels like people do want to hire me because they're looking and thinking about brand more, but I would argue still not enough. I would still say that when we think about brand in Silicon Valley, we think of it often as a logo, a color palette, maybe brand voice and sort of marketing communications. We don't think of it as something that lies at the heart of the DNA of a company and a culture. And I think that that is a shift that I would like to see happen more over the sort of the next couple of years.
Well, let me throw out a controversial perspective. In the last 2 years, there's been a bunch of very large companies who have taken massive investments in brand marketing, and they've done just what you said they shouldn't do. So you had Airbnb create a brand new logo that looks like, I can't say what it looks like. You have Yahoo, and Marissa Mayer spent a ton of money creating brand new logos, did it in a very transparent fashion. I look at the logo, to me it's still Yahoo. You know, you got HP, they created brand new logo and identity, and you look at least two of those three companies are struggling, and maybe their investment in brand or logo and color palette should have been done on something else. Edwin, what's your take on all this?
So, from my perspective, especially if you're selling to developers and IT, in general, they don't trust marketing. And now they have even more ways of quickly knowing what's real and what's not real. So for you, if you're going to sell to normal IT, to developers, focus on customers, focus on wins, successes, and let your customers do your talking for you. And then you'll be pretty successful. That's the way we did it with MySQL. That's the way successful, enterprise IT kind of startups do it. And to me, once you have 1,000 successful customers, then you can worry about branding and those kind of things. Until then, unless of course you're a unicorn and you have $1 billion to burn, then go ahead and do that. But in the meantime, focus on getting your first 1,000 successful customers, and after that, everything else will fall into place.
So Mickey, if brand is not logo and colors, what is it?
I mean, for me, it's your DNA. So when I think about brand, I think
But
about...
I don't have a line item to buy DNA, so how do what should I spend on?
So there's a difference here between, how you build a brand and marketing communications. I think how you build a brand is about everything that you just said, about really understanding your core consumer audience, what's the problems they have, how are you going to uniquely solve it, and how you're going to build an end-to-end experience that delivers against that. That, for me, is brand, and then you layer on top of that brand marketing communications, which may be a TV ad. So in terms of how do you invest, I think certainly for early stage companies, I personally believe it's really important to have that sense of self from very early on, based on the problem you're trying to solve and for whom you're trying to solve it. And I would invest in that. I would invest in the people who understand consumer, in spending time going out and talking to consumers or to your audience, whether it's consumers or professionals, and sort of building that DNA is what I would invest in first order. And then I actually think what you need to invest in from there is the product experience. There is no point in marketing a crappy product experience or something that doesn't deliver against the promise that you're trying to hold.
In fact, just building on what Mickey said, I think it's very easy to confuse branding with advertising. And so I think building a brand is about all the things that Mickey talked about, but it is also about telling a story. Eventually, whether you're selling to consumers or enterprises, you're selling to human beings. I mean, even IT guys, God bless them, they're human beings most of the time.
Low emotion human beings.
A little bit of emotion in that robot. And you've got to connect with that. You've got to find a way to tell a story that connects with people that they can look at, because eventually people buy from people. People buy trust. People buy the ability to sleep at night. And I think you've got to find a way to connect to that in a way that's appropriate to that audience, but is also human. And I think what is lost in most marketing, and I think Mickey alluded to it in Silicon Valley, is it's not about saying that brand marketing now needs to become more like direct response and tacky ads that interrupt your your reading experience. It's about finding a way to tell the story with content that eventually then ties back to business performance, whether it's sales or transactions or bookings or whatever the metrics you might track.
So let's get a quick poll of the audience. How many here are in a B2B space where you're selling to businesses? Okay, quite a few. How many on the B2C where you're selling directly to consumers? Okay, and a few of you haven't figured out who you're selling to yet. That's important. Make sure you figure that out. One of the things that I think has happened in recent years is you've seen actually quite a bit of innovation in IT and even B2B selling, where they're applying B2C techniques, making it more human. Like I always think back to Zendesk, and one of the secrets of our success there was we were really applying B2C consumer marketing to a B2B space, telling a story that connected directly with our users, not just about speeds and feeds and features, but about their experience. We're selling to help desk people or customer service or support, and these people have a pretty tough job, and they're kind of ignored in most organizations, and we made them into heroes. So what are the stories today that people should be thinking about and applying that into the B2B audience, since that was a big group here? How do you tell stories for B2B?
So I work in the beauty industry, and so Instagram is huge for us. Instagram has totally changed the way beauty services are bought and sold, and so that has been a really important channel for us. And the way that we have been using it, both from a consumer marketing and actually from a sales perspective, is engaging with our audience through the stories of their successes and their failures as both artists and business people. And we've actually seen it be a really effective social selling channel too, for exactly the reason that you just mentioned, which is we can reach out in a one-to-one basis, see someone who's posting something on Instagram, engage around that content, build a relationship, and actually we have seen the conversion from a sales perspective be extremely high. It's been over 80% of people that we reach out to in that one-to-one basis through Instagram that we have managed to sell to the product. So I would say that that has been sort of that kind of intersection of the channel, the story, and that one-to-one connection that you mentioned.
So you mentioned content. I'm not sure what the beeping is, but if somebody knows, yeah.
Tell us.
Edwin, what kind of content have you seen be effective, and what content and social media effective for reaching IT or technical audiences?
For me, like one simple word that would help you anytime you're trying to sell to IT or developers. In general, as I said earlier, they don't trust marketing. So if you can turn it into an educational thing, so for example, if you were going to have a white paper or a webinar, if you just use the word guide in front of it, like you were going to teach them something, educate them, your conversation will be much more powerful. And they're likely to listen, they're likely to come. And of course, as always, it's much better if that was done, not by you, but by a customer. In our example, for us, it is much better if Facebook talks for an hour on how, MySQL is the database that runs Facebook. Or LinkedIn does that, or Twitter does that, or Uber, or Airbnb. When they say it, you don't need any marketing. And then, of course we do marketing, because we are the guys in the background making sure they are talking about our product. So that's the way you would do it. You basically find your big customers, find the guys who the next guy wants to be, have them talk about your product with great passion, and then they become your evangelists. Then you promote that.
Okay.
And
excellent. Ashu, what do you see as different between B2B and B2C companies? And do you have both in your portfolio?
Absolutely. So first of all, I would say the lines between B2C marketing and B2B marketing are blurring. I think they're blurring incredibly fast. Let me emphasize actually some of the commonalities first, so I can talk about the differences. But one of the big commonalities, I think, is that there's infinite paths to purchase today. And what that means is that as a customer, whether it's a customer for a B2B product or B2C product, I start my purchase process in a variety of different ways. If I'm buying a car, I might start it on Kelly's Blue Book. I might start it on an auto site. I might start it on Quota or Facebook, asking questions of my friends. The same is true of B2B software today. There's infinite starting points. And more than 2/3 of the time, buyers make a decision on what to buy without ever interacting with the brand. And this is true for both B2B and B2C. And so I think the most fundamental challenge for marketers today is how do you have a dialogue, not a dictation, a dialogue with the consumer in whatever context they want to have that dialogue, and with whatever content is appropriate to them. Because I may be at the consideration point on Facebook, and someone else is still looking for awareness. And you've got to deal with both in the same context, because two buyers are at a different stage in their purchase process. So I think that's the fundamental challenge across both B2C and B2B. I think the tactics vary. Obviously, you tend to spend more money on one-to-many marketing in B2C. It tends to be one-to-few in B2B. There's more resources spent on one-to-one in the B2B case. But I think those, I personally think about as tactics.
I think the tools have really changed a lot in marketing technology in the last 5-10 years. And now there's an emergence of this whole, obviously content marketing, but also now the ability to measure things across different channels. There's been companies like HubSpot, Marketo, Eloqua. How many people here are using some of those tools? HubSpot, Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot. Okay. If you're not using these tools, I really recommend you investigate this. One that's super easy is HubSpot. And I mentioned them. They've really invented the whole idea of inbound marketing, where people are coming in and they're looking for content. They're not necessarily trying to make a purchase decision, but they're trying to get educated. So what's been your experience with some of these automation tools, and how should a startup think about the investment in marketing technology versus some of the other areas?
So I've only been at Starseed 3 months. So one of the things that I always observe is that I think they invested too early and made too many big bets too soon in terms of what they invested in. So I kind of walked in, they've invested in Salesforce, Marketo, Sail-Through, name your favorite other. And I feel like they didn't really understand their business, and they didn't understand the life cycle of their consumer well enough before they made an investment. So now we have this proliferation of tools, and it's fragmenting the consumer and the professional experience. So all I would say is, and I guess this is probably my shtick, is understand your consumer or understand your audience and understand their life cycle, so that you really make sure that you are mapping the tool you purchase to that, and you're making sure that you're not making a kind of penny wise, pound foolish investment.
I mean, to be clear, the tool isn't going to tell the story for you.
No.
And if you don't know what your story is or your audience is, automating it isn't necessarily going to yield any good results. Edwin, what's your view on tools for marketing automation?
For me, we have a slightly more interesting challenge, which is we tend to get this massive inflow of leads, since everybody loves free software, except nobody intends to pay for it. So it's a very challenging thing. So for us, we have all of these internal hurdles we put in, challenges to basically cull the massive inflow of leads we have, so that in the end, what we give to our sales team is a very small, highly qualified set of leads. And for us, the very best that can happen there is basically educational content, and content that we sort of make it so that it's not something that the guy who only wants free software really cares about, right? So for example, we'll start to put in a lot of word enterprise, which is sort of a signal to our audience in general that they'll have to pay. And if people are still willing to go and look at that stuff, we'll end up having a very good lead, for example. And then we have various metrics internally from there.
Ashu, how do you make sure that as an organization grows, that you have this connection between sales and marketing, and you don't end up with the typical Silicon Valley situation where sales is saying, well, we're not getting any leads, and marketing is saying sales isn't using the leads, or maybe less polite versions of that?
If we could solve that problem, I wouldn't need to go to board meetings.
So this is just, everybody should expect this, right?
But I think it, the fundamental thing I focus on is making sure that there's a very clear definition of the handoff between sales and marketing. And it sounds trite and obvious, but 9 times out of 10, when you really dig in, what sales defines as an opportunity and what marketing defines as a lead they're handing off is not the same thing. And so you have most of the stuff stuck in sort of Neverland, or in the ether in between. And so I always start at a certain point. It takes a while before you get those definitions right. To Mickey's point, it takes a while before you understand that consumer journey. But I think at a certain point in a company, and I would say it's typically post-Series A, I'll get sort of the sales and marketing person in the room together and say, let's really get this definition right. And we're both, it's not right or wrong, it's just a definition that works for both. And then we're going to measure both teams across the same definition. And I think if you get that, those handoffs work much better.
Yeah, I think this is the key to success, is having agreement on whether you call a marketing qualified lead or a sales qualified lead, that marketing sees or at least part of their job is to fill that pipeline and generate quality leads accepted by the sales organization.
I would also add that you don't necessarily need to make such a bright line between the two teams too early on. So one of the things that when I joined Starseed is sales and marketing was split. We've now brought them together because we realized we were too early to create that sort of artificial divide. We're still working out how to essentially reach and sell to our audience. And so you don't want to fall into this trap where things don't happen because you've caused a bright white line between the two. The example of Instagram social selling is a really good example of that. Like, that may never have happened if we'd had this Instagram is marketing's thing, and we're sales. Those kinds of innovations, when you're trying to work out what the formula is for reaching and selling your audience, can happen more organically and in a more cohesive way when you don't divide those two worlds too early.
Cool.
Yeah, I actually want to build on what Mickey said, because I think this bright line is a really, really dangerous thing. And it's really outdated. I mean, if marketing sends emails using one of the marketing automation systems, it's marketing. If a sales rep sends emails, it's sales.
It's the same email.
It's just an email.
Yeah.
It's an email they got. It's not like the sales rep is writing a custom email for every customer. So I think the distinctions are somewhat arbitrary, and I actually think are going to go away more and more over time.
Interesting. Well, but I think there's the one distinction that holds is sales owns a quota to hit.
So should
Well,
marketing,
that's not
shouldn't
true.
they?
Should marketing have a
Yeah.
quota?
Absolutely.
How do you measure the marketing quota?
We have a collective goal. We need to hit 300 professionals.
Okay.
And it's a team goal, and it's come what may, we're going to hit it.
Ashu, what do you say?
So what I do now is and this is specific to SaaS companies, but I think there are analogies across the board, is I actually have the entire executive team on exactly the same comp plan. So the VP of sales and the VP of marketing is the same comp plan, and it's all around net new ARR.
So net ARR.
Net new ARR,
Okay.
strip out all the other metrics, nothing else matters. And the VP of marketing doesn't make his bonus, or her bonus, if they don't get net new ARR that quarter.
It is amazing to see the collaboration that happens when executives have the same goals, and if you can, ensure there's none of that finger pointing. Well, we did our part, but they didn't do theirs.
By the way, I have the VP of engineering on the same goal too.
Excellent.
So,
People seem to care a lot more about how the quarter is going when they get compensated on it. That's what I've observed. So cool. We're open to taking questions from the audience. So anytime anybody wants to step up, there's no questions yet here, but we're okay with that. Okay, sir.
Hi, my name is Prasad. This is a question for Mickey. At what stage in the evolution of a startup would you make a decision to invest on brand and brand marketing? And what are some of the factors? Because I've seen examples where, for example, Tom's Shoes, who just make some crappy canvas shoes valued at $600+ million. And on other side, I see some products, great products, but they have zero brand equity. And a follow-up question, what is the simplest way to add this brand equity in our valuation of a startup?
Okay, so it's all about when should a company start investing in brand, and how do we account for, often I think VCs or CEOs account for the disparity in valuations. They look at some other company and they say, God damn it, those guys have better marketing than we have.
I feel like this is one of those things that's a sort of dark art that no one really has the answer to, least of all me. In terms of when to invest in brand marketing, I assume what you're referring to that is sort of mass broadcast marketing for the brand, TV, radio, etc., outdoor. So the way I think about that, if you're going to do it on a national level, then obviously there's a sort of tipping point in terms of the number of markets you're in. So to use the Starseed example again, we are a national brand, but we don't have enough supply for me to want to invest in brand marketing on the consumer side yet, because it would just be a disappointing experience. So I think about like tipping points for the business, and it will be different for every business. I think the other thing is that I would weigh, and this is what we weighed at Trulia when we did invest in TV on a national basis, is how are your organic channels working, and how well are you able to harvest, sounds horrible, but harvest demand. So when I think the right time to invest in it is when you have your organic channels firing. So this is SEO, this is email, this is on-site flows, and is your product harvesting your users effectively enough? And I think if you can consider tipping point harvesting and organic together, then that's three things to consider.
Okay, let's take another question here.
Hi, I'm Marion. I actually do business development for kind of thought leaders who also end up being startups. And I've been toying with the idea of what is the percentage of personal branding involved in that. Because, a thought leader, the technology expert, he's kind of something, sometimes my people are hiding, but if they get their word out there, because they're very technically experts, people follow them. But they also have the startup branding. So any thoughts, ideas around that part?
So about maybe Ashu, sort of thought leadership for the individual versus how do you make that into something that benefits the company?
Like Branson, right?
I think it really depends on the individual to some extent. There's some individuals I think that innately are, either because of their personality or their aspirations, want to build a personal brand, and I think it's completely appropriate in a lot of situations. I think in other situations it's not, because the individual isn't passionate about it. You can't artificially build brands. Again, I go back to sort of branding isn't about advertising or sort of relentless marketing communication. It's about defining what you stand for and being authentic about it. And every individual is different in that regard. From a business standpoint, as an investor in a company, I'd be very sensitive if the company was spending a lot of money building the founder's brand as an individual and not the company's brand. But again, brands don't necessarily take money. The best brands are built without any money.
I guess I'm in such a niche area, the technology people are so bright that if they don't start speaking or I translate for them, no one understands what they're doing. So it's like a disruptive industry.
I think the key is, as an executive or a founder of a company, when you tell your story, it has to be a story that's not just about your product. And if you think of the best or the most out there executives like Mark Benioff from Salesforce or Elon Musk, they're not just talking about their features. I mean, Benioff was talking about the end of software, or at least moving software up onto the cloud. So he's making a statement about the industry more than about his product, although he's a good showman also. Okay, let's take another question here.
Hi, I'm Jay from India. I run an IoT-based retail consumer product. So my question is on customer acquisition for both the heads of marketing and the investor. So in India, there's a lot of play of discount-driven customer acquisition versus brand-oriented, marketing-led customer acquisition. I would like your views on, on both these fronts, and as a startup, which one should we lean towards?
Who wants to take that one?
So I'll take a crack. I've done some investing in India. I think it's very easy in the short term to sort of think that, you'll have heavy discounts and you'll get a lot of trial of the product. And I don't know much about your product, so without being too specific, I think the question is, can those discounts lead to ongoing continued usage? And if they can, they probably make a lot of sense. In my experience in India, 9 out of 10 startups don't actually think through the continued usage, and what you end up getting is, if you hand out, I joke, if you staple dollar bills on your product, like it's pretty easy to sell that product. But eventually you run out of dollar bills that investors give you.
I think that's true pretty much every market. So we've seen big companies burn through a lot of costs on acquiring customers, and really the customers didn't really develop an affinity for the product. Okay, we're just going to have time for 2 quick questions, so we'll ask it really fast.
A quick question for the entire panel. How do you see the difference between how you use marketing tech and ad tech? And then for Ashu, how do you see those companies in terms of exits and valuation today?
So I think of ad tech as a subset of marketing tech. I mean, marketing tech is really the technology stack associated with marketing. Advertising is a component of that. Well, at a technical level, ad tech tends to deal with mostly anonymous data, and a lot of MarTech tends to deal with PII. But I think, again, that's a tactical difference. I think in terms of valuations, well, if I could predict the future, we wouldn't have to sit here.
I think the valuations are probably more correlated to growth and efficiency than is it ad tech versus marketing tech.
I mean, the other difference is I think a lot of ad tech companies are selling media and
okay,
marketing tech.
We need to move. Last question here.
Software.
Cool. I'll keep it easy. Any guidelines about the percentage spend on marketing versus sales revenue?
Percentage spend on marketing?
Especially for...
More.
Especially
what
for
do you think?
Startups.
For startup, what percentage marketing?
I mean, mean, I don't know if you can have a hard and fast rule in terms of percentage. I mean, particularly in the early days when you're testing many things. And again, it speaks back to this bright white, not having this bright white line between sales and marketing. I think of it as how you're going to acquire people and testing and working out what are the channels that are going to be most effective. And I see sales as a channel, quite
But
frankly.
I would say all in your spending is probably needs to be under 25% on marketing. That's headcount and programs. In a lot of companies, you may be better off hiring first in sales before you hire in marketing. You can use contractors for some things, but I mean, every company has a different mix or different answer here. I don't think there's a universal thing, but I would say early on, you got to know your story, and you probably need to tell it through customers and through very cost-effective means like PR and Google AdWords and content. And I actually think the ROI on Google AdWords is through the roof if you have an audience who cares about the problem you're solving. Ashu, any comments on this?
No, I think that's very well said. The only thing I would add is think long and hard about strategically what's your go-to-market. For the same product targeting the same customer, there are multiple viable go-to-markets. And you have to pick and choose. I'd be true to define a go-to-market and be true to that, and then work backwards. And in some go-to-market approaches, they're marketing-led. And you'll spend 80% of your resource on marketing and 20% on sales. And in other go-to-markets, it's the exact opposite. And I think that's where competitive advantage comes in, and you've got to decide where you want to build competitive advantage.
Okay, I want to give a big round of applause for all our panelists. Thank you for joining us. Okay, cheers.